We'd love to do the next one. We'd love to do the next one. But if all of a sudden it's like, hey, we're doing another shot. My name's Nick, Director of Cinema Sales for US and Canada for ZEISS. Alongside me, we have Tanner Grimshaw, our product specialist for ZEISS. Today, we're going to be talking about ZEISS Scenario. This is our real-time camera tracking system for all environments. So it's a really exciting product for ZEISS, and we're glad you guys are all here to check it out tonight. So first, I'd like just to kind of talk a little bit about the history of this system. Tanner and myself come from a company called NCAM. Some of you may have heard of NCAM. They were established in 2012 out of the requirement to create a complete virtual production setup for live previs. This is really before virtual production was a household name. NCAM created this live visual effects solution, and it really took off. And NCAM was it has been a crucial part of many virtual production shoots, big and small, for the last 10 plus years. This past summer, 2023, so almost about a year ago, ZEISS acquired NCAM. Tanner and myself came over to the ZEISS team, and together we have created this new product, which we'll be showing tonight, called Scenario. So with this acquisition, really ZEISS and NCAM are aiming to deliver outstanding, easy-to-use tracking and VFX solutions for professional production workflows. That's really the primary goal for us. Now I'm going to show you a quick video, which really kind of gives a good overview to the system and what it can offer our customers.
What a beautiful place. But guess what? It's not real. You know, these days, nearly every production has some form of visual effects, and most of them need camera tracking. This is ZEISS Scenario. Easy, real-time camera tracking, anywhere, anytime. This will speed up your visual effects pipeline. This means no more tracking markers in your backgrounds, and less work with your lens distortion. So you can be creative and experiment. This device and its software do the magic. You can track indoors, outdoors, on a LED volume, on a green screen, on a film set, or even in a parking lot. We got you covered. No matter how many objects move in front of the camera. And tracking outside? Yes, you've guessed it. Our system goes the extra mile. It tracks natural markers to compute the camera's movement for you. Oh, hello. But how does the system track in an empty environment? Come on, check this out. Do you see those reflective markers on the floor? They're used for tracking setups like green screens. And this little camera tracks the reflective markers anywhere you put them. And you can even perform live pre-comp on set. Any scenario is a breeze with our system, including this LED volume. By the way, we also support frame remapping technology. While they switch lenses, hear me out. With ZEISS lenses, there is no lens calibration needed. The system is plug and play. And another cool feature is oh, well, that was a bit too fast. The tracking data can be recorded and easily handed over to the VFX studio. So we are really speeding things up here, don't we? Wow, that's amazing. We also need to speed things up because we're running out of time. So now it's your turn. Let your imagination run free.
Thank you. Cool. So that was a nice little overview of what our system can do, some of the key differentiators. Really, there are two primary applications for our system. Virtual production, really live in-camera visual effects where you're using a green screen, an LED volume, some form of set extension or augmented reality. Final pixel, you're recording for use in camera. Or more traditional VFX, where you're recording for post-production. You're recording a scene, you're gathering that data, you're recording it, and then allowing for export into a variety of different formats. So we support both applications, which makes our system very user-friendly. So what are the key features to Scenario? Number one is what we call hybrid tracking, and you may have caught it in the video, but our system is very unique in that it does not require markers to track. We actually track off the natural environment that the camera is positioned in. So this little sensor that's sitting on top of the camera is facing the ceiling, kind of off to the window, and it is essentially tracking contrast within the environment. So it's picking points of interest and building its own point cloud. You can orient the cam bar in any direction. So natural feature tracking is arguably our biggest differentiator, really what sets us apart. That allows us to be extremely flexible, whether it be outdoors, indoors, just about any environment we can track in as long as there's enough contrast, enough static points to build a point cloud. That being said, there may be some situations where natural feature tracking just isn't doable. Maybe there's a lot of lighting changes or it's extremely dark. We do support the ability to track reflective markers as well, more of a traditional way of tracking. You'll actually see some reflective markers on our ceiling. We have two different modes built into our software, so you can either track natural feature mode or reflective marker mode, and we can show you how both of those work. Third, we actually have the ability to track an LED volume using frame remapping. So really what we're doing is syncing our cam bar with the LED volume and tracking invisible markers. So it's a rather newer technology, but allows us to really track in 3 different ways, no matter the environment that you're in. Second, what's really exciting is that with ZEISS lenses currently, there is no need for lens calibration. So you simply plug in the system, add a ZEISS lens, choose which lens that you're using, and you're done. Calibration is not required. We will support third-party lenses in a matter of weeks. So that means you can simply go into our platform, choose the lens that you're using, Ingenue, Canon, Fujinon. We'll have a full library of different lenses that you can pick from. And there's no calibration required. You're simply done. So that saves a lot of time on set. We will open up manual calibration sometime later this year, so that will cover all those other Panavision lenses that may not be in our template library. Lastly, compact size and quick setup. So our system is very small. We support just about every professional camera in that the system can be mounted on or near the camera in a variety of different ways. I answered this gentleman's question a second ago, but what's cool is that our cam bar can be positioned anywhere on or near the camera and faced in any direction. So it doesn't have to be on top of the camera. It could be underneath, it could be off to the side. You can face it wherever you want. What's also cool is that we can support a variety of different support systems. So whether you're on a tripod, a jib, a crane, a dolly, doesn't really matter for us because our system is so small and compact. Let's talk about software. So if any of you are familiar with NCAM, a lot of the technology that I've described is fairly similar to what we're showing now. Natural feature tracking, compact size, design. But what was a real challenge with NCAM was our software. I'll be the first to say that it was not easy to learn. Oftentimes would take 3+ days of full training just to understand how to use our system. ZEISS, when they acquired us, that was really their first priority, is making our software much, much easier to use. And we've definitely done that, especially for those that are familiar with NCAM. I think you will be very, very happy with how far we've come. For those not familiar with NCAM, I think you'll also be very happy with the system that we've built and just how easy it is to get set up and tracking without really any training at all. Second, we have a data recording tool built into our software. So a lot of VFX, post-VFX people in the house, we have the ability in our software to record not just camera tracking data, but lens tracking data in a single file. And you can export that into a variety of different formats. So we'll show you how that works in a little bit. And then lastly, graphic engine support. So NCAM has been around for a while, so we've made a lot of friends in the industry. We support natively a variety of different graphics engines, including Unreal 5, Disguise, Brainstorm, quite a few of the big broadcast houses in Zero Density, Pixatope. So there's really no graphics engine out there that doesn't support our tracking natively. If you did use a graphics solution that maybe did not support NCAM or ZEISS, we can send 3D tracking data out of our software as well. So what is needed to track? What are the pieces that are required to track a camera and a lens? From a hardware perspective, we have really 3 main pieces, and then we have some lens encoders, so I'll talk about each one. The first being the cam bar. This is arguably the most important. This is the sensor that is seeing the environment. This is looking out and understanding natural features or reflective markers, depending on what mode you're choosing. Second, we have the link. This is an optional piece of hardware, but it's highly recommended because it allows the system to be much smaller. Here's our link. This is more of a bridge between the cam bar and our server, which is called our origin. The origin is over here on our cart. So after the presentation's over, we can show you in a bit more detail. But it's about the size of a Mac Mini, and that's what's running our software. Lastly, lens encoders. So we do need to understand what a lens is doing in real time. Is it focusing? Is it zooming? Is iris changing? And we have a variety of ways to do that. Fortunately, with ZEISS, because we support, of course, XD data, we can take that data and send it directly into our link or our origin and access the data straight from the lens. If you're using an older lens, a manual lens, we can add external encoders just to grab the lens teeth and understand what it's doing. Or we have a variety of encoders that work with third-party Fizz systems as well, Preston, Arri, Tilta, Teradek. So it's a variety of ways we can understand what a lens is doing. Next on to the software. So you need the hardware, of course, to set up on the camera, and then you will license our software. And those come in weekly, monthly, yearly, and 3-year licenses for the primary scenario software. So whether you're project to project, maybe you want to go a weekly or monthly license, or you're a studio or a broadcast outfit that you're using the system every single day, then you can opt for an annual or 3-year. I can provide pricing for you guys individually. If you'd like to talk, just come grab me. Otherwise, you can check out some of our partner websites, including B&H, AbleCine, and RDH for pricing. So that's it for my presentation. I'm now going to send it over to Tanner here, who is going to go a little bit more in depth with our software, and then also to show you a very basic demo of our system, sending the tracking data over to the Unreal Engine.
Thanks, Nick. So I'm going to try to do this and have him be my extended arms as I talk, else you probably wouldn't hear me as much. But we'll go through. So as Nick said, NCAM had a lot of problems with the software. It was very cumbersome to learn. It was not intuitive. Me being the one that trained a lot of those customers, it was very painful to watch. It was very painful to leave the customer because in about 2 weeks, if they hadn't touched it, a lot of the information went out the window. I can confidently say with the software now, you can get up and running 70% of the way by just looking at the software and walking through it. It is all web-based, so all we need to know is the IP address, and we can access the software via your network. If you have it over Wi-Fi, we just set up the IP and we can tap into it. So the software is running from our server, but we're actually accessing it via a web browser on the Silverdraft computer here. So it's just over the IP that we've set. So the first thing that you need to know is the equipment. So as Nick said, we need to know sensor size and information as well as what lenses we're using. So first thing you'll see is camera body details. The reason we need to know that sensor size details is we will show you in a little is we needed to build an offset between where the camera bar is positioned to the main camera. And it's very important to have that sensor size details, else it won't reflect well in terms of your tracking and things will look like they're sliding and it'll be off. So we need that sensor size details. So to make it very simple, we have it all built out with different cameras, Alexa Mini, select your sensor size, so we just do 4K UHD, and we can see the active sensor size details are built in. Now, if there is a camera that we don't have in, we are going to continue expanding on these. You can manually punch in the information, find that detail online, but we're really trying to remove a lot of the hurdles that customers face. If they punched in a wrong detail before, then all of a sudden they're trying to figure out where their problem was when it could have just been, oh, I pressed a 7 instead of a 6, and all of a sudden things are a little bit off. So really trying to remove some of those, make it very simple, and that's just one of those things. So Nick can hit cancel because we already have. Next up, so we're using our Alexa LF here. We've got it set up. We go to now add a lens. So right here, lens, we have RE and RE ZEISS lenses. As Nick said, we will have templates. And so what that means is typically from a calibration manually from scratch, a zoom would take anywhere from 1 to 3 hours. Prime could be anywhere from 15 to 20 minutes. With a template, which we are calibrating and we're providing that free of charge in the software that will come later, that will allow you to be 90% of the way there because we've done all the calibrating, but because no two lenses are the exact same, you would have to fine tune it. But with ZEISS lenses, you can see if we select just Supreme Prime Radiance lens model, I've got a 25 on here. There's what's called a scale code. So each ZEISS lens has a scale code. And this is one of the coolest things I didn't know coming into it, but this scale code allows it to be exactly the same between two lenses that have the identical scale code. It's a tolerance for each lens. So if you had a 25 and I had a 25, of course they're not the same. But if they have the same scale code, they're identical. So this allows us to then select the right scale code per the lens, and we'll show you later, you can come and see all the different scale codes to get an exact calibration based off that lens. So that tolerance is set from ZEISS. All those calibrations are built into the software. You just need to tell it, okay, I'm using a Supreme Prime 25, what's that scale code? And I'll show you, you can all come, they're all a little not just engraved on there. Use that, and that allows us to calibrate. And as soon as it's added, that's it. There's no calibration. So that 15 to 20 minutes has now been removed. So if you had a set of primes, you're looking at probably an hour and a half. If not, this would just be a matter of minutes in terms of setting it up. And with the zoom, if you had 3 zooms you had to calibrate, you're looking at a day's worth of calibrating. You're looking at more adding them in, maybe 40 minutes tops, because you're fine tuning. So that's just in terms of the speed and a lot of the work that we're really trying to move forward with how easy it is to get up and tracking. I'll be surprised if anybody says calibrating a lens is one of their favorite things to do in tracking. If you are, I will shake your hand personally after. But that's what we're trying to remove, and ZEISS is really working towards that. So next up, we have our tracking tab. Woohoo, super exciting off this. So we need to go to add our tracking configuration. Here you'll see natural markers or reflective. So we need to tell the system, what are we looking for? Are we going outside? So you're probably not going to be using reflective markers, so you'd probably use natural. So it's really telling the system, what am I looking for? Now, we did talk about Brompton's frame mapping digital markers. Those are going to be essentially added there. So we could just set a title. If we don't just say Studio A. Great job, Nick. Next thing, we need to tell it the calibration that we're using. So in here, you could click, and we can see the different cameras we had set up. So you could have multiple cameras in that configuration. So if you know I'm working with 3 different cameras, you can easily switch between the 2. But if he selects the calibration, oh, can't go too fast. So now if he selects, and if we do the 25, so now I don't want him to hit save and activate. Well, you technically could hit save and activate real quick. So this is going to offset our things. We're now then welcomed with the setup and walking you through everything. So we'll go back to our other one because we already have it set up. But it will actually tell you and walk you through step by step, like, okay, you first need to set up your offset. And that's essentially telling the camera bar and where it's in relation to your physical camera. So
just to add, this is a really great way for repeatability. If you have multiple stages, you're outdoors, indoors, you can set up different projects, different configurations, depending on where you are. So if you set a 0 point, in Studio A one day, and you go outside and track and do a completely different environment the next day, you can come back to Studio A, select Studio A, and your 0 point will be exactly there where you left off.
So as Nick said, tracking configuration is important because it allows you to have different, if you have Studio A, Studio B, you have it configured, you can go in and say, oh, hey, we're setting up here, have everything configured, you don't have to set it all up. You just go to your tracking configuration. If you're using markers, okay, then it learns those markers and it sets it up, your 0 point set. So you can be, essentially you do the heavy lifting up front and you could be up and running in 5 minutes, 10 minutes tops. So tracking, so off the bat here, we just get a little bird's eye view of kind of what the UI. So we have just a SDI feed. We can customize these windows. We can change how many we want. But what we're seeing right now is our camera bar feed, our SDI feed, and then just a perspective view of where that is in 3D space. So it's giving you just kind of a real quick visual representation of what the tracking's happening. So all the green dots you're seeing here, these are the natural features it's picked up. Now, we don't tell it to learn those specific things. It automatically is looking for features in the environment. So that makes it extremely simple because you don't have to map out certain spots for it to do. It automatically picks up these features. And it kind of just lets out the information. You can then, as Nick maybe, I don't know, maybe you didn't or not, but you can tell it how far, as you go in 100 meters. Maybe you have stuff that's really distracting. There's a lot of movement in the background. You could tell it, don't track beyond 50 meters.
Yeah, so here's your tracking distance. You can.
Yeah, so if you, tracking distance you could set. So what that makes it is maybe there's a lot of people in the front. You can tell it to ignore that. Now you have to realize when you move, it is moving that tracking distance. So generally in those cases, we see that pointed up. And if there's maybe a lot of lights, but you have markers above, you could say ignore from these lights so then it doesn't mess with the tracking. It only concentrates from above. So there's a lot, as you'll hear, a lot of flexibility with our system. It's just dialing in what is it specifically your use case. We're used outside and indoors, so that allows for really quick setup. But of course, so there's a lot of different options for that.
And because our tracking distance can go only a half a meter away, the close focus is great. So you could theoretically track inside of a car. So if you're doing car plates, you need to track inside, driver's side or passenger side. There's no limitation to being in very small spaces.
So once you've kind of essentially turned on the system, the first thing you would need to do is build that offset. So if we just go here just to show you, and we can demonstrate this a bit more, is we need to know where the camera is actually positioned to the main camera sensor. So the camera bar is tracking and knows where it is moving within 3D space, but our main camera isn't. And we want to marry that to the virtual camera, of course, so then when it moves. So the only way to do that is we need to build that offset. So what we do is we have this tool, and if Nick clicks on it, it'll then walk you through this wizard. And this is one of the things that Nick was kind of talking about. What you're seeing is just one wizard, and we're hoping to integrate more of these wizards down the line, and it just walks you through what you do. So, okay, make sure you have the right lens selected, because a lot of times from somebody coming, they would select the wrong lens, they would do the lens calibration, and they would go, where's my problem? So it walks you through all the steps of, okay, set your exposure. It walks you through and instructs you, so that way it's kind of a helping hand. Now, of course, once you do this multiple times, you don't need that helping hand. You could actually skip the introduction and just have it go and search for the chart, which is one way that we build that offset. So if we're gonna...
Do you want to show this what the chart is?
Yeah, so what the chart does is that allows us to build that offset. So we first have the camera bar learn where that chart is in 3D space, and then our main camera, we point it to see that same chart. So what that does is it allows it to calculate that distance between the main camera sensor, or sorry, the camera bar sensor and the main camera sensor, based off it learning that chart. As long as you give it the right sensor size details and the right lens calibration, it is able to calculate that information, which means, okay, hey, camera department says, hey, we can't have it here. Okay, I had everything dialed in, everything was perfect. I will say from a competitor standpoint, if you move that camera, there's a lot of extra measuring to do. The only thing we have to do is go through this wizard, which only takes a couple minutes to retell it. Oh, the camera bar is now positioned here, learn that chart, point the main camera towards it, sees the chart, and it builds that offset. And everything else that you've learned, maybe you mapped all the points and set your 0 point, those are all untouched. You're just rebuilding that offset. That's the only thing that's been broken. So it allows us to be very fast in terms of the setup wise. It knows to not track moving objects, so it'll actually ignore those. So if there's something, if a subject walks in front of it, if I was maybe really still, it would probably maybe pick it up if I was extremely still, maybe move. But what you can tell it to do is you can say, it'll have those points in the point cloud, but you can tell it to relearn, and any points that aren't being used, it'll actually get rid of those and it'll recycle the points. So that allows you to, okay, hey, we are tracking here in one environment and we moved all the way over here. You don't technically need these points anymore. You can say refresh and it will get rid of all these points, but still maintain tracking in the current points, but get rid of these. So that's generally why I would say if you're on a film set, most of the time that's either pointed down on the ground or up, because it's trying to, you want to ignore as much as possible. You never usually see it pointed forward. Now, a gentleman I think said Joshua Tree, outside a tree. We've had customers where they're pointing forward and there's a bunch of trees in the background. They'll have the camera bar pointed backwards and the main camera this way, and then they'll build the offset and they'll use that as their stable way of tracking. So then it's using the trees, those are not moving. As long as it's not a windy day and a bunch of move, then they could point it down. Nick didn't talk about it, but concrete, we've actually had people track off snow into the different contrasts and different textures in snow. So really it's finding, okay, let me point the camera bar in a different direction each time and see, okay, what kind of points am I getting and what environment I'm working with. Outside, you won't really be pointing it up, so okay, down, left or right, whatever you're using is kind of going to give you your balance. And you get that indication down here, your status on tracking and how many points. You know, you can monitor that and have kind of a little bit of an idea. I think the next thing, because there's all the little intricate little different settings which we could go over, but most notably is Wrangler. So recording the tracking data, it's as simple. So we can record all the takes from the camera. So the nice part with that is this records all your tracking data, your phys data, as well as the distortion of the lens and all that calibration. So for post-wise, so what we would do is we can record all that information, have all the clips, and then back it up to just a thumb drive. And what that does is it just records all the information, and then there's a separate software called export, and that would be handled by your visual effects artist, where they would then take that and then choose what information they want from it into what file format. So you can actually set the different handles from the time code. You have actually a 1-minute handle on either end that allows you to, essentially if you hit record too late or hit too early, you could actually have and adjust that. We are working to have more integration in terms of record tally. So it's essentially hit record on the camera, it automatically triggers recording on the server. So that way it's a little bit simplified, as well as clip information. So that's something we're working on integrating more. So it's just one less thing that the person who's monitoring tracking has to do and set up. But that's, for the most part, a little bit on just the UI and simplified. And we could show you a little bit more kind of hands-on, and everybody could kind of come and touch and see it. We have our little Unreal scene here where we were just kind of put, aside from the chart being the shot. But yeah, so you can see in terms of, Nick and I are not Unreal experts, but just a simple key, tracking with the information, lens data, and how you can immerse your talent in the scene. And so, yeah, that's kind of just, well, aside from getting cut off a little bit there, but. So if you actually go back and go to perspective view, if you click. Yeah, so if we go, can you make it a single? Just a single view? Yeah, he knows exactly. Done this enough. So if we click here and we look at tracking distance, so if you see the dotted squares, it zooms out. Can you zoom out a little bit more? Oh, there you go. So you can see in terms of, you could set it to, okay, if there's a lot of information, you can tell it to track, okay, 50 to 70 meters. And you can kind of gauge that based off the distance of, you know, each one of these squares represents 1 meter. So you could actually see where the camera's positioned and actually kind of eyeball it based off, maybe it's picking up points. And you can kind of see like, oh, well, I know there's a tree right there. All right, 1, 2, 3. You could actually do the math and actually kind of gauge and go, oh, okay. So there's a lot of useful tools in which you could kind of start to utilize the software to kind of help you get things and dial it in a little bit. So that allows you to, okay, let me set my tracking distance. You could take a laser measure, but if you're outside, good luck. So you utilize that to kind of adjust it. Now, of course, if the camera's moving, that's going to change your adjustments. So you just want to be cognizant of that of, okay, I might need to not have it quite so narrow. Generally, if you're pointed up inside of a studio, I get it more narrow because, of course, you're just doing this. For example, like I was at SoFi Stadium, and we work with Ross Video, who does the Thursday night football games. And you can imagine all the noise of all the people in the stands and that thing's tracking. So what they do is they set the minimum tracking, and they use the field lines and the blades of grass as their tracking markers. But if they had it tilted up and the tracking started learning points from far away, they just have it minimized and say, track only within 15 meters. So that allows them to move and only track within a certain range. So that, for that reason, that's where they would then set that accordingly. Again, very specific case, not everybody's in that. If you're pointing up in a studio, I would then say, it's not that, okay, the wall's here, it's searching beyond the wall, it doesn't have X-ray vision, but you can have it remove, if you have, again, your lighting trust here, but maybe you have markers above, you could say, ignore learning points here, but only here. And that way, if things change around, it doesn't matter here, it's just what you're tracking here. So it allows you, again, the flexibility, but it's really just dialing it in. But most of the time, I just usually set it at its normal default values of 0.5 and 100 meters, and then see kind of what I'm getting with and how many points I'm tracking. Generally, I'll say more points doesn't mean better tracking all the time. You could have 1,000 points. It doesn't mean you're going to get better tracking. It actually could not be as much because it's learning so much information and maybe you're not using it. Generally with natural features, I'd say somewhere between 200 to 300 points. With markers, you can only need about like 90 markers between both left, right, and eye. So that's about 40 markers that you can do. So whatever is recorded is going to be exactly how the camera bar saw it. There's not going to be anything different. So it's essentially, if your tracking isn't good and you record, then it's going to be as good as it was live. Okay, yeah, come up and ask us questions after. We're still here. We're not leaving.
Thank you to Nick and Tanner for their presentation.
We have a ton of videos on our YouTube channel. Please consider subscribing if you have not. That way you'll get notified. I think there's a bell icon you can click, and you'll get notified every time a new one drops. And be sure to connect with us on Facebook and Instagram, Twitter or X, and LinkedIn. Use the hashtag LAPPG. And thank you to our partners. Again, platinum level AJ Video Systems. Gold level is Adobe Blackmagic Design, OWC, ZEISS, Frame.io. Silver level is Isotope by Native Instruments, SGO, and Avid. And we have lots of supporting media and community partners as well.